Hello everyone and welcome to the first installment of Thoughts on the Aphorisms of the Professor. Today is the 30th of December 2021 at 5:19 a.m. on a very fine Thursday morning. I am your one and only food philosopher, and this series is meant to be some insights into the aphorisms that belong to Jean-Anthony Brillat-Savarin, the author of the Physiology of Taste, which is considered to be the greatest book on food of all time. He's also known for the quotation, "Tell me what you eat, and I shall tell you what you are," which is yet another one of his aphorisms. Why he is called the Professor is actually because of during his time in which he lived, he was actually called the Professor by many of his friends, and hence it kind of stuck to him in his book. And so this will hopefully be a breakdown of what Brillat-Savarin might or will have meant when writing these aphorisms, and hopefully will serve as a starting point in the journey of food philosophy. Now, just a preface, some of this will be off script, some of it may be my own rambling thoughts, so do bear with me. And so we are starting today with aphorism 14. A dinner which ends without cheese is like a beautiful woman with only one eye. Now, you might be wondering what might Brillat-Savarin be meaning in this aphorism, given that it is a very unusual statement to give, especially given the context that we are in the year of 2021. There has been a lot of social change, even considering if we take into account the last 120 years, let's say, you know, and to make such a statement may seem quite sexist, to say the least. Obviously, many or some might say that any comment about women from anyone who isn't a woman, for a matter of fact, is sexist. And obviously, Jean-Anthony Brillat-Savarin is a man. Of course, this might get quite a few sexist comments or remarks back to it. Some might say, well, he is some white male living in a US-centric society, being from France. Of course he would say such a sexist statement. And he obviously saw women as inferior and hence was such a pretentious prick. But of course I am not saying that, I'm just saying some people might have said so. And if I were to make this statement to any ordinary person, of course it would draw quite a few eyebrows. Maybe a few words of concern or immediate shout at me for uttering such an idea. And of course, while I don't agree with this sexist implication of this aphorism, for multiple reasons in itself based on what Brillat-Savarin has stated about women, I think his aphorism lends truth to something else, something more insightful and deeper than whatever modern 21st century sexist implications that may be created. Because while truth within this postmodern era has been so relative, to sort of beckon back to an age of objective and even absolute truth, perhaps this aphorism is not the sexist idea that many would initially think. Maybe this aphorism lends truth to the idea of an order to dinner, but perhaps also to cheese, beauty, and the modern conceptions of all three. So let's start off with a story, an anecdote to say. You go out for dinner with some friends, One woman in the group feels like having pasta. Another man feels like having sushi, purely for the fish. And let's just say your sixth friend in the group wants a nicely cooked steak. And another one just wants plain McDonald's for the potato fries. Sometimes you just can't do away with that junk food urge. And so after a long and tiring 10-minute discussion, you all decide to go to a local French restaurant, satisfying the carbohydrate, fish, steak, and potato cravings all of your friends had. And so having sat down with your conglomeration of foods, you eat, you drink, talk, and have a merry time. The ideal sort of dinner that you have always dreamed of. And so nearing the end of the meal at the night, someone asks, "What's for dessert?" Now, instinctively, the first thought that comes to mind is something sweet. Ice cream is a near universal favorite. Perhaps someone might be lactose intolerant and hence rules that possibility out. Well, there are still other different desserts such as waffles and pancakes. Someone might want to take an Asian route and want to go to a nearby dessert shop with a Malaysian ice kacang or maybe Japanese mochi. But then someone chimes in and says, how about we just order some wine with a creme brulee? And so while this last statement might seem or may seem or is actually quite natural to diners nowadays, wine has not always been paired with sweet foods. And now, sure, you may state, the one and only food philosopher, wine has always been paired with cheese. It is like one of the most iconic combinations in food. And though while there is no falsity in the previous two statements, the order of that the foods that are eaten must be put into consideration. And so at a quick glance, perhaps no one at all would regard cheese to be considered as a dessert, let alone had at the end of the meal, for cheese has been for the longest time actually considered to be a savory item, with such iconic uses of cheeses like on pizzas and pastas, potato-based soups, and even stews. All of these dishes have traditionally been considered as savory. No one would dare think of eating cheese at the end of the meal because it's savory, let alone the aspect of incorporating another heavy dairy product into the end of a meal. Rest in peace, ice cream and heavy cream cakes such as cheesecakes. However, to draw upon another one of Brillat-Savarin's aphorisms, he states that the proper progression of courses in a dinner is from the most substantial to the lightest. Now surely this throws out all the modern conventions of a meal. Surely this is insanity. Throw out all of the entrees and the hors d'oeuvres for the heaviest dishes possible first. And while I do not think that Brillat-Savarin ever suggests this in the slightest, rather it is these two aphorisms that work in tandem that seek to achieve the crux of this matter. To first envision Brillat-Savarin's idea, what does a dinner that ends without cheese look like? From my initial thoughts, it seems that he notioned to the idea of incompleteness. This idea being followed by the idea of ugliness. Not ugliness in a purely negative sense, but in the aspect of being opposite to beauty. This would follow the same thought of an incomplete building, or perhaps a statue and artwork that has been eternally remained unfinished due to unforeseen or mysterious circumstances. These examples are not deemed unpleasant because they are inherently ugly, though they may be at this point in time, but rather because right now they're incomplete and therefore lack the beauty of a finished product. And hence comes Brillat-Savarin's idea. A dinner that ends without cheese, like a beautiful woman with only one eye. Not because the woman is inherently ugly, or because the previous dishes that had preceded the dinner left a bad taste or were inadequate, but rather because they are both incomplete. For Brillat-Savarin to mention such a statement establishes the underlying foundation that a dinner must end with cheese, for if it does not, then it is then incomplete. And perhaps there are stratified meanings behind this. Maybe a purely personal preference of cheese being the end of a dinner, or perhaps it was heavily steeped in the internal fusion of cheese and wine. Perhaps even Brillat-Savarin thought it would be funny to include such a simile to entertain what audiences read his book. However, I think it is like gazing upon a beautiful statue to only see it incomplete and missing the sight that it needs. So does Brillat-Savarin see a dinner that ends without cheese, beauty without completeness. And so this calls even more questions, but precisely two followed by one barring above the rest. Do we reckon back to Brillat-Savarin's idea of a dinner ending with cheese and solely cheese? And if so, can cheese even break the mold, excuse the pun, of sweet desserts? But I think the most important question is, what is the beauty within a dinner if not incomplete? And so this has been Thoughts on the Aphorisms of the Professor, Chapter 1, Aphorism 14. A dinner which ends without cheese is like a beautiful woman with only one eye. I'll see you next time.